Have you now got it, Stephen?
I have. Thank you, Edward.
This is like mentioning your dinner parties and reviews.
Oh, no, some bloke said, well,
La-di-da. That really did make me laugh.
What's this one?
The fact that he put it in his review had me killing myself. I was going to take it out, and then I thought, no, I'm going to leave it.
The night before, I had a dinner party, and I was using this sound stand to play music in the background. And so I mentioned it was quite handy for that. If you're having a dinner party, it makes quite a useful way of playing.
That's the sort of shit that I come up with.
I know, exactly. As I was writing, I was thinking this is going to be even more middle class than Ed.
And I am the most middle class person that has ever lived.
Exactly. And then some bloke put on the review thread, dinner party, oh, how very la-di-da.
That was his only comment.
Yeah, nothing to do with the product. Having a dig at me personally for having friends.
Are we recording yet?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Right. Sorry. Well, clearly I have got friends because I had a house full of them on Thursday night. So
Was it one of those rock paint cutouts that you left in the bin?
Yeah, it was
I'm thinking of the scene from Home Alone. Silhouette.
King of comedy, where he's got the kind of audience lined up in his basement and an interview chair.
We haven't even started yet. Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 2nd of September, which is a Tuesday, so we are a day early. The reason for that, we're going to discuss in a minute once I introduce who's on the podcast with me this edition. Assistant editor Steve Withers.
You made a woman meow?
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Waiter, there's too much pepper on my paprikash.
Games editor Mark Botwright.
Is one of us supposed to be a dog in this scenario?
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
You're the worst kind. You're high maintenance, but you think you're low maintenance.
Don't forget, the football window's still open as we record this on Monday afternoon. 9 hours still to go. Anybody signed anybody, Mark?
Me, yes. I haven't, not personally, but
I'm
I was thinking of it. But about United, Falcao to United, so they've got a ridiculous wealth of striking options and a shitty defence. That was the major one I saw this morning. And my team,
it's the Kevin Keegan approach. Just score more goals than the opposition does.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah, they'll be worth watching, but they're not going to win anything. That's for sure.
No.
Yeah, they won't win anything with kids. Nobody's died this week either, which is news in itself. So we can move swiftly on.
No one's died yet.
Yeah, Botwright's hanging on.
Money on somebody popping the clogs by tomorrow.
Right, so let's go to hardware news, and the big thing this week, the reason why the podcast is out early is at least myself and Steve are heading to Germany for IFA on Wednesday. It runs from Wednesday through to next Tuesday, isn't it? The 10th? Yeah. Well, that'll be next Wednesday then, the 10th of September. Biggest show in Europe, biggest consumer electronics show, but it's more of a white goods kind of show. Certainly that's the way I've always seen it. It's a huge show in terms of space, but a lot of that space, Ed and Steve, is made up with white goods, cookers, washing machines, that kind of thing, and then you have your AV hi-fi as well on top of that.
You make it sound like that's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing, Phil. I mean,
yeah,
the risk of sounding...
Firstly, you can feed yourself quite happily by just doing
a microwave is all you need.
But you sweep around the kitchens whilst doing the demonstrations.
I don't have dinner parties. A microwave is fine.
At the risk of sounding middle class and getting accused again, you can go to the Samsung stand. They've got some Michelin star chefs down there, and you can get some really, really good food, nice glass of champagne for nothing, which is always a big thing in my book.
Well, that's fine. When we're out shooting videos, that's where we'll go for our lunch. But we are the AV forums, not the foodie forums. So it's the AV side of things that we're interested in. So, Ed, what are you looking forward to?
Do you know what? IFA's one of those funny ones where that so much of the announcements ahead of time, things like obviously Samsung's curved soundbar that was announced and went up on the site this morning at the time of this recording. The actual true audio things are a bit more lost in it, but with all, obviously Yamaha have announced about 48 products from what I could work out from the news story. There's a huge amount of stuff, and let's face it, it's going to be the first time that a lot of these Atmos receivers are going to be, out and something you can look at in the metal. Whether I don't know if it's different because you guys normally go on the press days and I normally turn up once everyone's actually there, so I can do heavy metal T-shirt bingo. But they don't generally do much in the way of AV dems, so I don't think it's going to be an opportunity to hear any Atmos demos.
Yes, there are
Really?
Atmos demos. Yes,
good.
Right.
Well, I'm like you, Ed.
That's good news.
I'm definitely keen to see the Atmos, new Atmos receivers that I'm sure will be there, and any demos that are available. Plus, if I can find a demo disc I can pinch, that would be really handy too.
2 if you could.
Because you've currently got an Atmos receiver in your house.
I do, yes.
But no Atmos stuff to play on at the moment.
No, and I don't necessarily know for sure. It's had a software update. I do not necessarily believe it's had the Atmos codec.
Okay, well, here's a question, Ed, because one of the big selling points of Oro was the up mixer. So, has Atmos got an up mixer?
I can encourage this Yamaha to send stuff out of ceiling channels if they're selected, yes.
Yes, it does.
But it doesn't. Now, what I can't tell you, because as I say, I don't think the Atmos codec is physically on it, it can do that as a result of the Yamaha DSP program, which has been able to send signal to these speakers, well, for some years now. So at the moment, I don't know if it's doing it in a Dobley way or if it's just doing it in a Yamaha way. But you rest assured you can make full use of any additional speakers that you plumbed in at the moment from the moment you install it.
Okay, so there's the Atmos side of things, which I still think is dead in the water. I just don't see it taking off. But it's going to be interesting to see and listen to it. I've heard Aura 3D, so it'll be interesting to hear Atmos. Steve, what are you looking forward to?
Well, obviously, Atmos again, as with Ed, but I guess from the video side of things, hopefully maybe get some more projectors announced, because last year was quite a good year for that. We had Sony with the VW500, which was a really groundbreaking price point for a 4K projector. So fingers crossed there's more news from them. And OLED. Hopefully OLED will be there. We haven't heard anything recently from LG, so I don't know what they're up to, but obviously they had made some announcements earlier in the year about both a 65-inch 4K OLED at a very attractive price point, and more recently in the States at least, 1080p OLEDs that were looking, sort of around a very key price point. So again, if there's some news about those, that will be interesting, and hopefully other manufacturers as well might once again show something of an OLED nature. I would be very surprised if their Korean cousins weren't there in some form, given how much emphasis LG are currently placing on OLED.
It's strange because Samsung, this time around, Samsung are playing the LG game, which is to announce everything before IFA in news stories and press releases and so on, and LG's being quiet, and usually it's the other way around when it comes up to IFA. Yeah.
So maybe LG are planning it, because last year at IFA, what happened was, you're quite right, Phil, it was LG pushing everything out the week before, basically, in press announcements, and then at the show they didn't really have much. They could show the products, but there wasn't much for them to announce in terms of new stuff. Whereas Samsung had the big unboxing or unboxing, was it? Event? Unpacked.
Unveiling?
Yes. Unveiling. Well, I think they called it Unpacked, yeah, but it was a big unveiling of their products, very much a la Apple. So yeah, basically Atmos, OLED, and 4K, particularly more to the point 4K. There will be 4K TVs there, of course, as well. I'm sure. I know we're expecting Panasonic to launch their 902, which obviously they showed at their convention earlier in the year, but we're going to launch in a sort of in Q3.
Nice if it has Netflix on board. That would be a step up.
That's not having Netflix on a 4K TV when that is currently the only real source of 4K content is like a massive shooting yourself in the foot, isn't it?
Of course, hidden in the Samsung, well, it wasn't really hidden in the Samsung announcement last week though, but the announcement that Amazon are going to start their 4K streaming in October, and it's coming to Samsung TVs. That was one of the big pre-IFA show news stories that was announced last week, Steve. So that's interesting that Amazon's now getting on board. Wonder what it is that they're going to stream in 4K. Can only be really film material, can't it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they do produce their own shows, things like Black Sails, Vikings. I don't know how they're shot, but if they're shot on 4K cameras, there's no reason why they couldn't do the same thing Netflix are doing. Which is
everything they're doing going forward, all their own content is shot in 4K.
Oh, there you go. That's going to be
the case for the last 9 months or something.
As far as 4K movies go, I think the studios seem much more controlling with that in respect to that. I mean, I know that in that same Samsung press release, they mentioned the hard drive that we saw at CES back in the beginning that would come preloaded with movies, and you could download some more over a period of time. I don't know. And that was going to be launched certainly in the States. Whether it's going to get a European or a UK release, I'm not so sure. But that would be good, because the big problem, as we've said on numerous occasions with 4K, is there isn't any content. And if you want to flog a 4K TV, you really need to put some 4K content out there. And obviously, Samsung are more than aware of this and are trying, I think, to a certain extent, to corner the market a bit, which they have done quite successfully with catch-up services recently as well. And that's fair enough. I mean, I can't blame them for doing that. I mean, you need content, and they're trying to find ways of delivering. What does massively concern me, and if we don't hear anything at IFA, or possibly CD after IFA, but definitely at IFA, if we don't hear about 4K Blu-ray.
4K bloody Blu-ray.
Yeah, that's coming.
Crime against humanity. Well, but seriously, I mean, there was no mention of that at all in that press release.
And you know what, Steve? I think the problem is that because, we do this every day of the week, including weekends, and we get press releases and we talk to these companies and we see all this stuff, sometimes well ahead of time, well ahead of the consumer and all the rest of it. I think sometimes we get a little bit ahead of ourselves. And who's to say that 4K Blu-ray has to be announced now? What's the rush?
They said at the beginning of the year, the BDA, that they were going to announce the specifications. So, I mean, what was stopping them from doing that at the very least? I mean, the specs have already been agreed as far as I'm aware.
It might be that they want to get the best possible system, so they're going to take the time of it, because there's no actual rush to market. And I think if you went out and spoke to Joe Public on the high street and said, do you know what Ultra HD is, or do you know what 4K is? I think you'll probably find 1% of the people you ask that question to maybe have heard of it.
Yeah, but from the point of view of the manufacturers, it's surely easy to sell a 4K platform if you've got some 4K content. And
I'm not arguing that, but you're saying if there's not an announcement of 4K Blu-ray, it's the end of the world, and I don't think it is. I think there's plenty of time.
You could say, well, maybe something will come along at CES, but with every passing month, you kind of feel that more and more emphasis being placed on streaming.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's as big a rush, Ed. Do you?
I don't know. I do think that quite separate or partially separate from the general public, if the online and on-demand content providers have got a solution which not ultra discerning members of the general public find satisfactory, then any opportunity for 4K Blu-ray, it's already looking quite niche, and it's just going to become more and more niche. So I think there is an element. But you see,
I think if there is a demand for it, and there will be, if the market is flooded with 4K TVs over the next 5 years, and there's a call for content, they'll announce 4K Blu-ray. I think certainly Steve getting his knickers in a twist right now. I think you're panicking about nothing at the minute. All I'm saying is give it time, because I think once the ecosystem's there, or one side of the ecosystem's there, then you'll start to see things come on. Because we had HD TVs long before Blu-ray.
Yeah, but we knew it was coming.
And we didn't have streaming services like we've got
hang
now.
on a minute, but did you? Because you had HD DVD as well, and you had all that kerfuffle that went with that. So, I just think you're panicking over nothing at the minute, Steve. I'm trying to calm you down, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to save your blood pressure.
I wouldn't mind so much if I could stream shit, but I can't.
I know you draw the parallels between the launch of Full HD and Blu-ray, and it was some time after, but I don't think that the landscape's quite the same. As Ed was sort of alluding to, we've got those streaming services now, and they are getting better and better. And if it's 5 years down the line, it might be too late, and again, it might not be necessary, depending on the efficiency of the compression and the network infrastructure. You might not actually need 4K Blu-ray. I know Steve might do if he's still living in the sticks, with a crappy internet connection. But for the majority of people, streaming may just be enough.
Yeah,
and if it may be so niche, a few years down the line, that a physical format just won't be necessary.
I don't think there's going to be any question about it being niche. I mean, even Blu-ray is still a niche area of the market. What do you think, Mr. Botwright?
I'm still of the opinion that a large amount of people just went to HD screens simply because of the form of the screen themselves. Larger screen size, that kind of thing. A lot of people were happy just with the idea for many years of upscaling DVDs. I also think by the time you get to the point, as has been made, where you might have 4K Blu-ray, will the mass market just be so entrenched in streaming, and it's the easiest thing, and you've got this kind of convergence of devices that the idea of sticking another box under the TV, which is something people complain about, and everything's been about kind of trimming down on things in entertainment units under the television. Will it just be a case of, well, they won't want that? You know, you've got your smart TV, you've got a box that streams everything you want. Is that going to be all that's really needed? And the extra quality perhaps just won't be something people go out to seek.
And when did you buy your last Blu-ray disc?
Probably best part of a year ago. And part of that is because of streaming, I have to say. Snap. It really is.
The last Blu-ray disc I received was from Steve through the post. Last time I bought anything was well over a year ago. Hodge?
I do occasionally buy Blu-rays, just mainly because of the 3D for testing for reviews. I wouldn't bother otherwise, to be honest. Very few. There's not many I feel compelled I need to go out and buy straight off. I also think last time around we had the consoles, Xbox 360 and PS3 pushing HD a bit. People got these sources sat there and they didn't have anything to play them onto, but we haven't got 4K consoles. So I think that's another small
a good question,
factor.
actually, Mark H. So Mark B, what is the current state of play with 4K gaming?
4K gaming? That's... I don't think you're going to see that. It would have to be so specialist, and you're looking at PC only. I can't see it. Well, look at, say, 3D with consoles. It was never even really tried that much. It was a select few titles, and it was just something. It was a nice thing to put down in a kind of bit of marketing blurb to say that it will be there. But yeah, it just fell by the wayside.
Can you game in 4K at the moment on a PC?
Yeah, in theory, I think you can, can't you?
In theory, you can. I think there's a very interesting thing about Elite, the kind of update of Elite, where you're going to be able to take these kind of huge shots. I think they're in 4K of space, but the game has to kind of like slow down to a crawl and stuff to just take it.
It should be possible in terms of the video acceleration and video cards that are available, because there's lots of them available now with different frame rates and so on for video editing. So it doesn't take that much of a leap to put that towards gaming if the game, like you say, Mark, was developed in 4K, released in 4K and so on. But there's not a market for that, is there, really?
I think at the extreme end of PC gaming, there will always be a market for pushing things, and there are people who will go out and they will buy huge graphics cards purely for that and continually build new rigs so that they can be at the kind of bleeding edge. The problem, I think, with 4K is just the question of, well, theoretically, yes, you can do it, but all the kind of little niceties that go along with PC gaming, like being able to have absurdly high frame rates and the like, might have to fall by the wayside. So yeah, but theoretically it's possible.
Okay.
I think the extra, slightly off topic, but the extra resolution's being used in multi-screen setups for like driving games. So you got 3 screens, one in front, 2 side, obviously. And I think that's where it is getting used, but not, I think, like a native 4K game on a single screen.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, I think you better start panicking then, mate.
Well, just in answer to your previous question, Phil, I had a Blu-ray arrive today. So.
Yeah, but I think you're
so are we saying here that
I think you're part of a dying breed, I think.
Well, no, I was not saying.
Did you buy it though?
Yes,
you bought it for a dinner party.
Out of 5 of us who are AV enthusiasts, am I the only one regularly buying Blu-rays?
No, I bought Winter Soldier.
Oh, okay, there you go. So Ed and I. So
I'm gonna come out with a confession here. I bought Winter Soldier because I've just done a review of a speaker package, I've got this Atmos receiver to do for you guys. I've got just a big tranche of AV reviews coming up for various people. I just thought it probably would be wise if I showed at least some willing and had a basically up to date film to mention.
So basically, like Hodge, you've bought it for work purposes, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
But
you're part of a dime.
Phil, it's a new series of Wheeler Dealers this evening. You think I'm going to watch a film? I've got Ed China to watch. And Fast and Loud kicks off again on Thursday.
Right. Okay.
But that doesn't bode well for Blu-ray as a format, does it? If I'm the only one out of the five of us regularly buying them now.
Yeah. Well, that just tells you everything you need to know. I think, Steve.
Yeah. Get with it, Grandad. Start buying records.
Phil, what are you looking forward to, Ethan?
Me, I don't know because it's what was that promo girls? Yeah, it's been 2 years since I did the show properly. I mean, like go around all the halls and see what everybody has on. It must be about 2 years since I last did that. So this is the first
3
one.
Years. It's actually 3 years.
Is it 3 years? Is it?
Year before last is when you flew out for that interview and then flew back.
Right. I think this time around, I'm just interested to see how things have moved on in 3 years in terms of the show. Certainly, the last time I was there to cover it properly, it was decreasing in size. It was getting smaller. Some of the halls were standing empty because we were right in the middle of the economic recession, and of course there was the whole Euro thing going on at the time and so on. So a lot of panicking in the markets, and there was a lot of exhibition space which was empty. So I'm interested in seeing how it is now with the market the way it is now. There's going to be 4K, there's going to be Curve. That's going to be the next big thing for the next year and a bit. So we're going to see that again at CES in January when we're there. The problem is I don't see any innovation happening, and this is what's worrying me at the minute. I think manufacturers, certainly apart from LG, are looking at shifting LCDs. Even if they're 4K resolution, it gives them an excuse still to sell LCDs, which they can stop their R&D or certainly reduce their R&D spends on the types of things like OLED. It depends how big LG push the OLED thing. They're being suspiciously quiet this week. I mean, we haven't had any emails about press briefings or anything, which is not like LG at all. So it could be something big, or they've got nothing to show us. One or the other. So that's the one concern. I want to see how the show is. I want to see how healthy the industry is in terms of that. But the innovation side is worrying me because it only looks like LG's pushing it. And I think LG's pushing it just for the fact that they can have a solution that they can do it quite cost effectively. But it might not be the best solution. Interesting to see. In terms of projectors, I've only really heard noises coming from Sony regarding new projector at the show. Of course, CEDIA is the week after IFA, and CEDIA is traditionally when most of the projector manufacturers announce their stuff. So IFA is usually quite a quiet show, apart from Sony when it comes to projectors. So I think I'll wait till CEDIA the week after and see what's announced there. I don't see anything big for projectors. You know, the fact that Panasonic have not introduced a new projector since 2012 is, I think that's and even after buying Sanyo, I think that shows you where I think the home projector market is at the minute. It has to be cheap 4K, and I don't think anybody can do cheap 4K at the minute. So I think that market's stalling a little bit. So I'm not expecting to see anything there. This is starting to sound really quite down, isn't it?
Well, I'm from my already, if you like, my section of the world has already sort of changed and is existing in different circumstances already. So the audio and 2-channel side of things, I imagine I'll be able to go into much more detail once all of these infernal embargoes are listed. But there's some going to be some simultaneous good news from a couple of manufacturers about a little bit of licensing, which will be announced over the CEDIA period, which we'll come back to. And it's weird. Obviously, 2-channel gets very limited coverage at IFA, but there's a bullishness to some of the stuff that's being announced and coming out.
Yeah, but is it false hope though, Ed? This is my big concern for the audio side of things at the minute, and companies. They seem to be putting a hell of a lot into Dolby Atmos, and we've just.
No, sorry, I wasn't talking about multi-channel.
Okay, sorry.
That's on a hiding to nothing, mate. Stereo's where it's at.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realise you were talking.
No. There's truth be told, the Atmos is going to live or die on media. We'll leave it be. I would say that the Yamaha that's here at the moment even if Atmos is a total bust, this is the first sort of, if you like, smart receiver, where there's all sorts of additional functionality. Yeah. This is the first one where absolutely everything the manufacturer says it does. What does it look like, Ed? Because this is another bugbear of mine, and that's the fact that in terms of design, ergonomics and design, the whole AVR market, the whole multi-channel market, and even to an extent the hi-fi world when it comes to integrated amplifiers, it hasn't moved on in terms of design. It's still a big it's still a big black box, and I may be in a minority here, but I lament the passing of the orange displays that used to mark Yamaha products out at a glance. But I think it's a perfectly unobtrusive looking bit of kit that I don't think you can turn a home cinema amplifier into furniture. You can do it with a stereo amp, and certain companies like Devialet and people like that are doing clever and bold things. But the problem is, at the basic level, Phil, people don't want to stick massive quantities of loudspeakers into their rooms, and inviting them to add more is not going to be endlessly successful.
And we're going to come on to that subject in just a sec. I just need to plug again that it is IFA this week. So next week's podcast will be our IFA roundup. Mark is going to be doing all the news. That's Mark Hodgkinson before Botwright has a heart attack. Mark's going to be doing all the news from the show, and that'll be from Wednesday morning onwards. So everything that is announced will be on the homepage of avforums.com, so go there. We will have links through to the hub page, which is just nothing but IFA news, if that's what you're after. And then over the weekend and into next week, you should start to see some video presentations from us, from interviews, and some written articles from Steve as well about what we've seen, what we think personally, our opinions on how the show is going and so on. And I know I started to sound a little bit down there in terms of where the market's going and so on, but I've got to say I'm genuinely looking forward to the show this year, which for people like us, Steve, who do this on a regular basis, who and we are lucky to do it on a regular basis, but at the same time it can become a bit of a grind, especially when there's not that much to see. Yeah, I'm quite excited this year for IFA and CES in January.
You see, I always like IFA because the sheer randomness of stuff on show. I mean, let's face it, Phil. If you get bored with the with any of the sort of things,
I'll be straight down to Samsung for my lunch.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, so joking aside, I mean, you and I both have more than a passing interest in cameras. I mean, I spent quite a lot of time on the Sigma stand the last time I was there. They had some cool toys. I like the fact that it's all under one roof. It's a bit scattergun.
But you see, it's not this year. This is another thing that really annoys me. Why do companies who go to these big events, which have huge, and I mean massive, showgrounds, decide that they're going to have their thing off-site?
Well,
and more and more are doing this, and if they think that, you just got to look at journalists. Journalists are lazy. They're not going to go from Messe Centre and get in a taxi and go somewhere else and pay for that taxi to go somewhere else. So these companies that are trying that on this year, good luck. You're not going to get much in the ways of footfall, certainly if you're trying to get your message out. However, there is a new section of the Messe Hall which Samsung have completely taken over, Steve, called the Cube.
Yeah, they have. I mean, obviously they've built that since last year, because it certainly wasn't there when I was there last year. Certainly, Samsung dominated the show last year, I've got to say, in terms of its coverage, the size of their stand. They had a massive unpacking event the night before. It was very much Samsung heavy. And it looks like it's going to be equally the case this year, judging by the fact that they've taken over the whole of this cube, which I'm glad it is in the convention area, because at first I thought, where the hell is that? Because I hadn't heard of it before.
Yeah,
I think we can expect to see a lot of Samsung.
Good. So that's the IFA show. We will have our full wrap up in the podcast next week, as well as our videos and written articles and so on. And like I say, the news going up from Wednesday morning. So, Ed, we were talking about people putting more than 5 speakers, or even 5 speakers in their living rooms, and obviously that's seen a big market increase for the likes of Yamaha and other manufacturers who, Yamaha kicked it off with the sound projector, they called it.
Yeah.
And it's developed into the sound bar. They now call them sound plates, sound bases, and so on. So this whole new market, it doesn't just come out of fresh air. I mean, obviously these products are what people want. They don't want 5.1.
Do you want to know the most surprising feature I found on this Atmos receiver that's lurking in one of the setup menus? This thing has got a virtual rear surround setting. It actually has a completely programmed set of processes for working with just the front 3 speakers and working with phantom surrounds. And the fact that Yamaha have felt that that's necessary to do on a flagship AV receiver is quite eye-opening. So yeah, it's demand led. It came from 2 ends. We've got televisions which are wafer thin, which means that they sound, broadly speaking, they've got the sort of clarity and range as those sort of singing fish things. And equally, people have just gone, there has to be a better way. And for any, remotely, I mean, ironically, my lounge is always looked a bit odd, and it's going to look even more odd once it's got 2 complete systems in here. But for anyone else who's going, do you know what? I can have 75, maybe 80% of the performance that I had before, and literally 25% of the hassle and boxes. Where do I sign? Just bring it on. And that's the nature of it. And all of the solutions where you actually have speakers at a given point, yes, you can separate them from the receiver wirelessly in terms of signal transmission, but they still need to be powered in some way, shape or form. And the only way you can develop sound further, you can try and get more out of the existing same number of speakers, but then that forces people into kind of very dedicated and specialist speaker purchasing decisions, which may or may not be small and room friendly, or you add more conventional speakers. And neither of those things both of them are hopelessly compromised, I think, is the best thing that we can say about either of those approaches.
So Steve, not only are you living in the past with Blu-ray, being an enthusiast with a full 5.1 system, and I'll join you here because I've still got a full 5, we're living in the past, mate.
Well, I mean, yes, to a certain extent. We are living in the past in the sense that the majority of consumers are no longer that keen on putting, and by consumers I probably mean their partners more than the enthusiasts themselves perhaps, but even a lot of enthusiasts now aren't that keen to start putting speakers all around their living room, which is going to make selling Atmos as a concept tricky. And obviously it's one of the reasons why they developed the Atmos speaker in order to try and create a similar effect without having to actually put speakers on the ceiling. But personally speaking, and I don't care what they say, I don't care what manufacturers say, well, I can do pseudo surrounds and we can do this. When you actually hear a genuine 5.1 or 7.1 setup, you can't fake that properly. There is always going to be a compromise, and bouncing sounds off of rear walls and this kind of stuff is never going to sound the same. So I think a lot of it's down to people who are resistant to having lots of speakers in their rooms, which is fair enough. I also think a lot of it's down to people who have never really experienced a great surround setup. Because I think when you have experienced a well-done setup, you think, well, I want that. I don't want to compromise. But I appreciate that not everyone has the luxury, perhaps, of a dedicated room, or even, partners who are going to accommodate them when it comes to putting speakers. And obviously, you've got a 5.1 system. I've got a 7.1 system, but 5.1 isn't too bad because basically you're putting speakers in the corners of the room. 7.1, clearly you have to have speakers out on the wall behind, isn't always feasible. Maybe your sofa's against that wall, or there's a door there, or whatever reason. It's not always that practical. And that's one of the things that when they were talking about Auro 3D, made sense. The idea that by putting their height speakers where there already were speakers was less intrusive than putting speakers in, say, 2 rears or in the ceiling. But I mean, I think the technology itself obviously is going on leaps and bounds. Whether we're the last holdouts in terms of popularity is another issue, but the technology is impressive. When you hear a demo like Atmos or Auro 3D, you think, well, this is the fact they can cram all that into a disc is pretty impressive in itself. And they're talking about delivering it via streaming as well. So there are other delivery methods, not just disc-based. The technology itself is really impressive. It's just a shame that the popularity of the AVR is definitely waning.
Yeah, there is that. There is the fact that it's all these speakers in here. But the soundbar, as a concept, Mark, it's a good idea in terms of it's better than the speakers in the TV. So that's got to be a one-up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it wasn't, then you really are wasting your money. Obviously I've been exposed to an awful lot of soundbars. It's not, if I was going out spending my money, the 300, 400 quid, I wouldn't go and spend it on a soundbar personally. but as you say, it's certainly an upgrade from your TV. I'm quite favouring a 2.1 system at the minute, so you don't have to worry about the surrounds, but you get a nice bit of separation and a decent bit of bass. That's where I'm currently at. Because I got a 5.1 system, as I've said before, just doesn't work in my room. So for all the reasons we've said earlier, it's just a no-go. So I'm liking a 2.1, but a soundbar, as long as you've not got unrealistic expectations, it is certainly a good solution.
Can I ask a stupid question?
There's no such thing as a stupid question.
Wait until after.
Only a really stupid answers there.
Don't judge it too soon. How kind of low in overall height are soundbars these days? Because I had one many years ago before I went to start building a 5.1 setup, but it strikes me now that, should we say, I would have trouble kind of fitting it in with kind of TV units and the like seem to have less depth to them now, because everything, when I originally had this soundbar, I had a Sony DVD player that was kind of, it was like two concrete blocks stuck together. So how do you have like a little kind of plinth or something that you stick the TV on to kind of raise it up above it? Because it seems quite a kind of...
Are you telling me that you haven't read and digested every word of my focal dimension review that's, I think, still on the front page?
I was saving it for Christmas.
Well, you might want to have a look at it a bit earlier, because it answers this question and more. It's actually quite a clever... it's quite a clever response, and it's both sound bar, but then there's what they call the sound base. It has an optional subwoofer which connects directly to it, which becomes the plinth for the TV. And I think that's quite a clever solution, personally.
And of course, you've got sound plates and sound bases, which are the same type of thing from other manufacturers as well, where the TV sits on top of it.
I think you're more struggling with the actual traditional, in inverted commas, speaker bar. You're more struggling with height than you are depth. So they're not very deep generally. But I've had them varying. I've had that Humax STE something or other 1000, 2000W, and that was tiny. It was like a hand weapon. It was so thin and light but then the next thing I had in was an enormous Great Paradigm soundbar, which was 15 centimeters tall. So it cut off a good chunk of the bottom of the screen. So it's a bit of a mixed bag,
like a hand weapon.
Yeah, it was. You pick it up and it felt like if a burglar came in, you'd quite enjoy taking him out with that. It wasn't
they
sharp.
Should put that on the advertising.
Dear Humax PR, I'm very sorry that I will not be returning the review sample, as I am in prison, and most of the review sample is embedded in some scrote's brain.
Yeah. Apart from the fact it had rounded edges, it was probably perfect.
His final words were, "That sounds just like 5.1."
Oh dear. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I have to say, the Focal was an interesting case in point, because it actually did. It's the most convincing sort of simulated surround I've used since I was more consistently playing about with the Yamaha sound projectors. But I went straight from that to the Tannoy Mercury 5-channel system, which the review will go up in a bit. And I mean, that's less money than the Focal. Obviously, it needs an amplifier as well. But the jump in just scale and actual immersive surround is absolutely considerable. But there's no getting around the fact that the Tannoy stuff is taking up a vast amount more of my lounge than the Focal is.
Yeah. I think it's definitely the case these days that I think the domain of the 5.1 system, 7.1 Atmos, has to be the dedicated room going forward, I think. And certainly the custom install market seems to be buoyant at the minute, because it's playing right into their hands. They usually design the room from the ground up, so they have the flexibility and the ability to add these extra speakers in, hide them within the walls or in the ceilings and so on. It seems to be focused definitely towards that sector of the market, and to people who can afford to get a company in and put a home cinema into a dedicated room or into a living room and hide everything that needs to be hidden. I think for the majority of AVForums members, they will have a 5.1 system or 7.1 system in the lounge, because they have found a way of getting it in there. And I think for the general public, I don't think they're losing out by not having a 5.1 system. That is a given. But at the same time, I think the technology in terms of the sound bars and sound projectors and so on, Ed, has come forward quite a bit now, and the whole point is to buy something that's better than the sound that you're getting at the minute. And I think all of them, apart from the really cheapo no name things, tend to do that, tend to up the performance. And then I think once people get to hear that and they get used to a good performance, that's maybe the point where they will be able to persuade the other half that 5.1 is maybe the next step up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there will be. I don't think it's going to stop overnight. I think we need to be very clear about that. I think the trend is towards soundbars have a degree of momentum because they are appealing to people who are just simply disappointed with the way their television performs, and they are also taking less committed 5.1 owners off the peripheral as well. And when you're actually dealing with the difference between a small subsat package or a home cinema in a box and a soundbar, then there's not much in it, and the soundbar's still more convenient.
Yep.
So yeah, that's where the fun and games. That's where the challenge is. I don't believe many people are chopping in serious AV receiver and dedicated surround speaker packs for soundbars, unless their extenuating circumstances demand it. I don't think they're doing through performance preference, but it is just nibbling away at the people that's doing it. And the categories it's nibbling away at are also the entry level points for people who would then begin to take it more seriously and upgrade to more serious equipment.
Well, this is the point I was trying to get at. It even though they're going for soundbars, there's more soundbars being sold, which means that more people are taking an interest in the sound from the TV, and that has to be a good thing for the market from the bottom upwards.
Yes, depending on where they want to take it. The problem is that because you're buying a single item, the upgrade cost is exactly the same. It's incredibly substantial. You have to start all over again. You can't upgrade a soundbar in any meaningful sense of the word. Whereas if you bought an AV receiver and a set of speakers, you could either update the AV receiver to take advantage of some formats.
But I don't think people will start at that point. This is what I was trying to get at, Ed. I don't think that not AVForums members, but the majority, they wouldn't start at that point. If I said to my parents, you need to improve the sound on the TV, they're going to buy a soundbar.
Yeah.
Or a sound plate or whatever. Or they just wouldn't have bothered, but no, it's fine for me.
Yeah, I think with AVRs, they don't help themselves much here in terms of appealing to a broader customer base, because they still look quite imposing and slightly old-fashioned, and look at the back of them and there's thousands of inputs.
I see the pictures on some of these reviews and I think, Jesus Christ, look at that back panel. And if you
there's like 10 S-Video. Who the hell's who's used S-Video in the last 20 years? So, you don't need all that stuff.
So
they should have the courage to strip out a lot of that and make the interface easier, make the front slicker and more attractive. How many times do we see menu systems that look like, Ed, you can not naming names here, but like Panasonic, Pioneer, Yamaha, they need to be upgraded. They look really old-fashioned. Sony at least have kind of given the menu systems a bit of a lick of paint in terms of their appearance. But it's only this year that I finally reviewed an Yamaha AVR that built in Wi-Fi.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Unlike, as you mentioned, I think in the previous podcast, unlike the Pioneer where you both reviewed recently, it was just press a button and easy to install. They need to do stuff like that. It needs to be simple to install. It needs to be easy to set up. It needs to be intuitive to use. It needs to be less imposing and less frightening. And that will help them out, I think. But at the moment, you show your average punter a big AVR, they just shit themselves.
Yeah, and they're going to buy a soundbar.
That might just be a weapon,
exactly.
I think, buddy.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, we'll come back to this one. We'll see what the trends are. What's that?
Readers' back panels.
Oh dear.
Could take off.
Yeah, that's what worries me.
Right, so let's move on to games news. And Mark, what have you got for us?
Nintendo announced a new 3DS.
What a surprise.
You telling me you're not first in line? Yeah, it's shock horror, an updated design, so not entirely new console. obviously they've got this long track record for kind of iterations and revisions of their handhelds. This time it's basically going to be accommodating the things that were included in the original Circle Pad Pro, which was a little peripheral that would stick on to the side of the console and would give you an extra thumbstick. Well, when the original console was released, the first thing that most people asked was, will we get by with just one thumbstick? It's technically not a second stick as such. I think they're calling it a C button. So it's like a little nub, basically to control camera functions and the like. They're adding in a few little details like coloured buttons, which I'm sure will be a major selling point. Extra triggers, which obviously replicate what was on the Circle Pad Pro. One interesting little thing is an improved screen, which is going to aid viewing angles of the 3D. Most people, I think, have probably turned that off by now, but for the few people who haven't, that should be, quite beneficial. There's also, it can control brightness on the screen on the fly, so it should give potentially better contrast and also better battery life. But the main kind of selling points are that it's only going to certain games that come out will obviously only be able to be played on this new 3DS because it's going to have an improved CPU, and so Xenoblade Chronicles is going to be kind of exclusive to that, which will annoy the fan base they've already built. But also it's a way for them to get this near-field communicator support into a handheld console, because it was something that was used on the Wii U's gamepad. Well, not really used as such, but now they've announced these little amiibo figures, which will have little kind of chips in them, so you can use them and interact with games. So their plan is to kind of, flog these little figurines to probably the casual market, but also people who like things like, Super Smash Brothers, so the traditional Nintendo fan base. And it's a way to kind of tie it in with that, with their obvious dominance in the handheld market. There's no release date for the UK or US yet, other than it'll be 2015, but it's set to be released in Japan October the 11th, so not long to wait.
I'm sure it'll be lovely.
And that's games news.
Has anybody got the right time here? Because I'm looking at 56 minutes, but I don't think that's right.
I got
1 hour 2.
1 hour, 2 minutes.
2.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm only...
But we
all
did
that,
spend 18
14
minutes at the start just
crap.
dicking
I got
about.
3:37. But it's on a Casio, so I wouldn't judge
It's
that.
3:34. Your Casio's wrong, bro.
No, I said it 3 minutes early so that I don't end up...
What? So when you travel back in time, you can get back to the right
Well,
point.
if you notice that I'm always late for this, it's because I said it, so it's, Otherwise, if I didn't do that, I'd be at least 15
Well, you'd be
minutes
even
late.
later than you already were.
Yeah, exactly.
I always like this part of the podcast where I can start eating Haribo. It's the Withers sequence.
Are they tang-fastic?
They are. Is there any other kind?
So this is just the point of the podcast where everybody else switches off and I say, what's at the cinema, Steve?
Well, this week, Phil, I saw What If, which is the new film for Daniel Radcliffe. It's very much in trying to be When Harry Met Sally for the modern age. Covers the same kind of idea, which is can a man and a woman be friends and not get sex and relationships get in the way. It's a film that completely rests upon the popularity and charm, to a certain degree, of Daniel Radcliffe, who I've got to say I thought in the film was pretty good. He's a nice, charming young man. His comic timing wasn't too bad. His performance was reasonably good. Nothing about him is particularly bad. The problem with the film is that it kind of combines a series of classic rom-com set pieces, things like going skiing dipping at one point or having a campfire scene and this sort of stuff. There's she meets him, he meets her, they have instant chemistry, but she's got a boyfriend, they've been going out for 5 years, and he's not an unpleasant guy either, which is quite a nice change. Actually, they didn't make him out to be a complete dick. He's a reasonably nice guy. He says, well, we can just be friends, and obviously that's not going to happen. There's going to be hurdles in the way of that friendship. And they do have feelings for each other, which they try and suppress or avoid. The problem with it is that it's just not funny enough. I mean, it thinks it's witty, but it isn't. There's a couple of lines in it that work quite funny, but most of the time, the dialogue just isn't funny. If you compare it to When Harry Met Sally, that is a genuinely funny film. It's very witty, very well written. This, not so much, unfortunately. So it's not funny enough, and it's not different enough to make it interesting as a romantic comedy or even a romantic drama. They don't make it. If you've watched something like, say, 500 Days of Summer, that's really good because it's cleverly structured. It's very different, and it's also very funny. This tries to be something like that, but it fails miserably. And really, at the end of it, you're just thinking, well, I don't really remember any of the lines from that film, pretty much. The cast were okay, and the best thing about it was Daniel Radcliffe. And when you're saying the best thing about a film is Daniel Radcliffe, it's probably not going to be a masterpiece, with all due respect to him. So my advice would be to go and watch. In some cases, some of the people on this podcast watch it for the first time. Go and see When Harry Met Sally. When Harry Met Sally, it's a much better movie.
Okay, and Blu-ray's released next week, Steve.
Next week, we've got Bad Neighbours, which is the Seth Rogen, Zac Efron comedy. I use comedy in its broadest possible sense. That came out earlier in the year, where a married couple move into a new house, and there's the frat house next door. So it's kind of like, Animal House for the current generation, if you like. Again, one of those things where it should be so much funnier. You've got Zac Efron, who can be quite funny. You've got Seth Rogen, who you expect to be very funny. And yet, it just isn't that funny. There are some funny moments in it, but on the whole, it's one of those films, again, that thinks it's funny. Actually, I'm sure they had a great laugh making the film, but you don't have such much laugh watching it, which is a shame. So it's mediocre and a bit disappointing. Brick Mansions, I haven't seen, but that's Paul Walker's last film, not counting the 7th Fast and Furious movie, which they're currently just finished shooting and using his brothers as body doubles and that kind of stuff. But his last film he completed before his untimely death, which is a remake of a French movie. I think it's District 13, is it? With one of the same stars from the French movie. So he's one of the guys that does a lot of that parkour stuff, running through buildings and things. Haven't seen it, but if you're a fan of the French version, you might want to see it. It's basically the US remake. The Angriest Man in Brooklyn is one of the last films Robin Williams made before his untimely death 2 weeks ago, where he's a guy who gets told he has cancer and only has a few days to live, but that's the doctor's mistake. And in fact, he doesn't have a few days to live. Again, haven't seen that. That's with Mila Kunis. It looked funny in the trailers, but I haven't seen it. Homeland Season 3 comes out. I watched Season 1 and 2 and then got sick of it, so I haven't seen Season 3.
It's all right.
Yeah, and the Big Bang. Yeah, well done, Ed. It's all right. We'll put it on the poster, shall we? On the box cover. It's all right. Ed Selley, AVForums. And Big Bang Theory Season 7's also out next week, if you're a fan of that. Although, let's be honest, who buys TV shows anymore on box sets? Just watch them on streaming.
I'm so glad you didn't say the N-word there. Would be accused of,
Well, Homeland probably. I don't think Homeland is on the N-word.
But it's on 4OD, isn't it?
Yeah.
Homeland is on the N-word.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, he's right. First 2 seasons are certainly.
Okay, well, in that case,
The recent edition.
I mean, a good example. I have been buying Walking Dead DVD on Blu-ray actually to watch as when they come out, but I noticed that pretty soon after the disc gets released, it turns up on the N-word. So I'm going to watch it on that in a few weeks' time instead.
Can we just let's be clear?
Netflix.
Just in case we've got Netflix, we're not tiptoeing like Rotherham Council around some sort of unpleasant potential accusation of racism here. We just have in the past over-mentioned Netflix.
We just mention Netflix almost every podcast. That's all, and because it's a good system, but there are other systems out there, streaming services out there.
Other streaming services are available.
We're going to have to come up with the equivalent term for sticky back plastic, aren't we? For on-demand online content provider. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So, Steve, what is your favourite streaming service? For $5.99 a month.
yeah, bargain. It is. I mean, I'm watching Cosmos at the moment on Netflix. Again, a series I probably would have bought on DVD possibly, but it's great. Watch it in near HD quality on Netflix. It's brilliant.
Well, Edge just mentioned that 2 of my favourite Discovery type programs are back. I'd actually cancelled my Now TV while I was away on holiday and so on. I need to get that back now because my 2 favourite things are now coming back onto my Roku box on Now TV. This is how I watch TV now. The last couple of days I've watched everything on iPlayer. So I watched both Doctor Who's on iPlayer. Not sure if I'm convinced yet.
Well, I'll give him time. It's still the early. I think he's growing into the role. There's only 2 episodes, so I think Capaldi's he's got the.
I just keep expecting him to say, "Oh, for fuck's sake!"
Yeah, come the in or the off.
I would probably actually break the habit of a lifetime and watch Doctor Who if he was playing it more like Malcolm Tucker. I couldn't be bothered otherwise. So.
I thought they addressed the obvious elephant in the room in the first episode, which is obviously they had Matt Smith, who was in his late 20s, and Jenna Coleman's in her late 20s, and they had very much a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, and she clearly was in love with him. And now he's a completely different bloke, and he's in his 50s. I thought they addressed that issue very well in the first episode.
Yes, they did.
They got around that one, and I thought the bit when Matt Smith turns up ringing from the past,
that
was very well done, and I think they got around that one quite well. And then they're quickly bringing in some other characters to further fall in love with to get that one out of the way. But I think Capaldi's playing it well. He's playing it darker and he's edgier, and this Doctor is not a nice Doctor necessarily. He asked the question, "Am I a good man?" in episode last week. So. I thought structurally, I thought this was a much more interesting episode. I thought the plot of the first episode was rubbish. This one was better plotted, and an interesting Ben Wheatley directing them, which is quite surprising. The guy that made Kill List and Sightseers was a strange choice, but I think he did a great job.
I thought it was quite funny on Twitter, and I forget who it was that tweeted it, but it said 6 people had complained to the BBC over a lizard kissing a cockney.
Yeah.
I do think.
But you're right, Phil. I don't watch broadcast television, as in actually the time it's broadcast at all.
1 o'clock news. That's me. I watch the 1 o'clock news, and then I switch the TV off as soon as it comes to the weather, because the weather's never good news where I live. I switch it off. And
where you are, surely you get a warning of whether you're going to have White Walkers or other other issues. And
I'll watch the news again on the evening if I have my dinner that early, or if doing other things maybe a little bit later on, but I don't sit and watch TV. And that recent James May thing was on, which was quite interesting. Ed, I don't know if you saw it, but it was all about the People's Car. Watched all of that on iPlayer.
I recorded it, watched it at other times. I mean, obviously I generally have stuff on during the day. I mean, I'm disappointed that Nat Geo have gone down from 2 episodes of Air Crash Investigation at 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. to just 1. I think that's very disappointing. But
it's like they've run out of air crashes.
I don't know.
Not at the moment.
You've got to imagine the producers of this series are just suddenly like they're going, God, we had a real drought of stuff, and now we've got far too much to cover. So
I don't think as much about air crashes.
Not the Russians.
Do you need an investigation into a plane that was shot down? I mean, I think we all know why it crashed.
Yes, except it's still not abundantly clear who shot it down.
Or why.
MH370 is still completely unsorted. There was that Taiwanese runway overshoot. There's been one in Iran. And then there's one that disappeared over the Sahara Desert and was found a couple of days later. It's been plane crash-tastic, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but...
Yeah, and obviously our thoughts are with condolences.
None of these accidents involved a company called German Wings, did it? Because I'm flying with them to Berlin.
No, they're a very good airline. It's all...
Sounds like a tribute band.
German Wings, yeah.
I think they're all wet lease, those planes anyway, so it doesn't really make much difference. But yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine.
So Hodge, are you the same when it comes to TV, or are you more traditional?
Pretty much. Apart from live sports, football or whatever. I'm pretty much totally on demand streaming based these days.
Botwright?
No, I'm still a little bit old school. Vegging out. And generally channel surfing until I find Storage Hunters on. But you don't have to look for that.
Tell me more.
But generally, I think it's a case of most of the devices that I've got for streaming tend to be kind of consoles, so therefore it's usually there for a short time. I'll stream something perhaps after I've played a game or perhaps just before, but then I tend to kind of turn them off. I'm still more of a gamer.
Yeah. Okay.
To be fair, I mean, obviously, all seasons of the A-Team recently appeared on.
Yes.
On Netflix.
That was in one of your reviews, Ed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I watched. I'd never seen the pilot before with a completely different face in it. And literally,
who was the original face man then?
You don't ask me that off the top of my head. Not Dirk Benedict. Let's just leave it at that. It was unsettling and wrong. But more the point, they were dealing with Mexican bandits. And that's not a euphemism. And if you want, literally, it could be the new go-to definition of visual ethnic stereotyping. I mean, short of the bloke having a Speedy Gonzales-style mustache and a sombrero, it was just ticking every stereotype in the book.
Gringo.
I love the A-Team. Unashamedly, it's what those thousands of rounds of ammunition expended without ever hitting a human being.
It was great. I watched a bit of it the other day, and I'd completely forgotten just how old George Papard looked, even in the early days.
Yeah.
You think, what was this crack team doing? Infiltrating a care home.
Mainly cracked bones through osteoporosis. Yeah.
I used to watch it because I quite fancied one of the girl who was in it originally. I think her name was Melinda Cooley or something.
Oh, no, she was extremely pretty.
They ditched her.
No, I think she actually wanted out.
There should be no dames in it. And I think he used the word dames in the 80s. Shows you how old he was. Back to your point,
and pissed for the most part, wasn't he?
The episode when Boy George turned up, it was a bit of a low. When Boy George kicks a door in, like, no, that ain't happening.
I just love it. The thing is that during the building montages where they're assembling, but you can actually, it's all quite legit. It's like a really fast version of Scrap Heap Challenge. It's just magnificently convenient that they were always shut in a building with just the right amount of oxyacetylene and all the bits needed to make it work. But no, the other one, I didn't realise that one of the early season ones with a religious cult, it's got John Saxon from Enter the Dragon playing the bad guy. Yeah, quality. And the bloke who was the baddie in Live and Let Die in another early episode as well.
Yaphet Kotto.
Yeah.
They must have had a higher budget back in those days then.
Or they were just properly desperate. It's always very hard to work out.
Gagging for work.
Can I just say to anyone listening, and they're going, God, you really are scraping the barrel. Withers, in his infinite wisdom, had what's your favourite romantic comedy on the running list. So anyone that thinks that us talking at length about the A-Team is bad, just think you dodged a bullet. Just count your blessings, and we'll sign off, and the world is a better place for it.
Tim Donegan, by the way, Tim Donegan played Templeton Peck in the pilot.
Yeah, badly.
Never heard from again. He's one brushed with stardom. Because clearly Dirk Benedict's brilliant in it. I love the scene in the credits when the Cylon Centurion walks past, because he was also Starbuck in the original Battlestar Galactica. For those who are too young to remember.
Really old.
Yeah, get the words out, old man.
He can't concentrate. He's busy setting places for his next dinner party. Come dine with Withers.
Now that's a feature.
That could be a competition.
Yeah, there was also, just before we wrap up, there was a complaint that we don't do any of your snacks anymore, Mark. So next week.
We didn't do it because all I've had is cheers of applause that we'd stopped doing it.
Yeah, that was the impression I got, to be honest.
You can't please anybody. I think every now and again we might have to.
I think once a month maybe we'll let Mark loose in the kitchen. If he does some homework and actually does something decent, rather than just making it up in the last minute.
What's your snack for this week, Mark? Chips.
Next week, beans on toast. With cheese on top.
Cheese on top of the beans?
Yeah, and there's actually a flavour of Golden Wonder crisps called Cheesy Beans on Toast.
It's got to be Walker's, because Golden Wonder's gone under, hasn't it?
Is it? Golden Wonder has.
That's the reason why.
No, the reason why is because they were the most. They if you complained to Golden Wonder because you found a green crisp or a mouse.
Oh, they'd always give you your money back, or
no, they'd send you a ridiculous quantity of crisps. I complained about finding a big green salt and vinegar crisp and sent them a photo of it, and they sent me back 48 bags.
You sent them a photo of one giant green crisp.
I did, yeah. I was a student.
You have a lot of time on your hands.
I was a student at the time. I had all the time on my hands.
I need a background image for the podcast. You send it over.
I'll see what I can do, but I don't think I've got it anymore, Phil. We're talking 2000 was or so when I did this. But if we're going into anecdotes, the wonderful story of the bloke posted on the B3TA question of the week. A bloke had an aunt who was a serial complainer. We complain about absolutely everything in the hope of getting free stuff. And she sent a missive to Kellogg's because she'd found a solitary burnt cornflake in a box of cornflakes. And they just wrote a letter back with a single unburnt cornflake sellotape to the top of the letter.
Yeah.
Whoever did that, that's just mighty. I salute you and hope that you're still working in customer service somewhere.
Right.
Is that enough shit, Phil?
I think we've done enough.
We've limped over the line once again.
And on that bombshell, that's all we got time for the AV Forums podcast this week. Don't forget it's IFA special, where we wrap up everything that we're going to see this week over in Germany, and fingers crossed, I think we've all got our fingers crossed that we're going to see some interesting things. Otherwise it's going to be a pretty short podcast next week. So my thanks to Steve Withers.
I know. Oh, high maintenance.
Mark Hodgkinson.
I'll have what she's having.
Mark Botwright.
Days of the week underpants.
And Ed Selley.
I have as much of a dark side as the next person.
Don't forget, you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news and video. Plus, why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.